AI Realized, the podcast about everything that is new, now, and next for enterprise executives deploying AI. Hosted by myself, Christina Elwood, and my collaborator, David Yakubovich.
Our guests will share what's driving AI adoption, use cases, and business models for the data and AI economy.
Where the future is bright.
Welcome to AI Realized, the podcast for enterprise executives leading AI deployments. From addressing security, data, and operations challenges to managing the organizational and management changes, AI deployment presents the opportunity to redesign our organizations from the inside out. I'm Christina Elwood, your host for today's episode. We're talking today with Ivan Lee, founder and CEO of Datasaur. Ivan, welcome to AI Realized.
Thanks, Christina. Thanks for having me on.
Just by way of a little background, tell us a little bit about Datasaur.
Of course. So Datasaur is a 5-year-old startup. We were founded with the mission of democratizing access to the world of natural language processing, or NLP. So that's the subset of AI related to text, documents, and audio. We started by introducing a data labeling platform. A lot of these machine learning models out there require a lot of data in order to train and understand and be customized to your specific workflows. And our data annotation platform helped organizations, Fortune 500 companies like Netflix, Spotify, Qualtrics, and even the FBI in annotating this data and training their NLP models. In the last 2 years, we've launched a new product, LLM Labs, that helps people with doing exactly the same, but on the LLM side, comparing, selecting your models, and then gathering the data to fine-tune and customize your own private LLMs.
That's fascinating. And it seems so important that people have tools like yours. Once they've labeled their data and selected their model, how do they use your products or services once they're in production?
Yeah, we are built to support people in production, right? A lot of folks will train their models for the very first time, but there is an evaluation part of the cycle. Once you have something in production, how do you ensure that not only are you maintaining that level of quality, but also identifying the areas where it's faltering and improving upon that? So we're a core part of that cycle. Take LLMs for a moment. As you've deployed your model, you have it live, we've introduced this notion of prompt unit testing. Unit testing is a well-known, beloved practice in software. It just has all these mini tests that software has to go through before it's deployed live to prevent something like the CrowdStrike issue. We're doing the same thing for LLMs, right? You can have all these unit tests, all these prompts and correct answers out there, and you can run this daily, weekly, just to make sure that your model, whatever is out there, is answering exactly as you expected. As soon as something diverges from what you'd expect, we will notify you and you can review what might be going on.
That seems very commonsensical and practical. When calculating the return on investment for a production AI use case, what factors do you recommend people consider?
This is a really important conversation that I'm seeing become increasingly important, particularly as data scientists who generally are more interested in kind of research metrics like F1 score and accuracy. They need to also learn to speak the language of the business side of things and understanding how to explain the ROI for these AI solutions. So there's a couple of things to note here. First of all, this is the first time in our generation that we've seen software with actual unit costs. So this is not, in the past, we've always assumed there's a one-time cost to build the software, and then after that, it's forever free to scale out in production. LLMs, because of these very expensive GPUs, because the sheer amount of compute required to power these, they have real costs. Now, a lot of the research methods that are very popular out there, things like chain of thought reasoning and calling multiple models to get the right answer, you can imagine that each of those multiplies out that existing core cost. So I'm seeing a lot of pilots that may cost $1, $5 per query, and it doesn't make sense in a business environment. And so the very first thing is, okay, does the unit cost make sense on an ongoing basis for this business application? If you want to automate customer support for an organization like Hyatt Hotels, would you be willing to pay $1.50 per answer? Probably not. So you have to make the unit cost make sense first of all. But beyond this, there's a lot of other dimensions that people are just starting to think through. There's also a lag time in getting these answers. So when you call ChatGPT, some of these answers are taking you 20 seconds. It's masked a little bit because it's typing it out in front of you and you feel like it's making progress, but it's a far cry from Google, which delivers 100 million results in 0.07 seconds. So here we're looking at cost, we're looking at latency, and then finally, of course, there's the quality itself. Those are the three main criteria that people are looking at when it comes to ROI. And then there are additional behind the scenes factors, things like compliance and regulatory measures, and what kind of models are you allowed to deploy, and what kind of data can you send to third parties. So there's a lot that goes into this equation beyond just accuracy and precision.
The costs are changing considerably, aren't they, Ivan? What do you see as the principal drivers for cost reduction in the next year or two?
Yeah, so I am very optimistic about a lot of the changes that we're seeing. For example, when OpenAI launched their GPT-4o Mini, it was their first announcement that was not as focused on how much larger the model was or the new use cases they had unlocked, but it was solely focused on how much cheaper it was compared to their own predecessor product. We're also seeing downward pressure because of open source models like Llama, which won't have that proprietary fee attached to it. We're seeing downward pressure from models like this onto other models like Google Gemini, which also is advertising how efficient its model is relative to its competitors. So I do think that inference costs will go down over the next 12 months. And that's just great news for the industry because it's going to unlock that many more business use cases that will now make sense where it may not have made sense before.
Many companies are considering moving their or running their LLMs behind the firewall rather than in a public service. How is that going to affect the cost model?
I think that as Apple launches their Apple Intelligence on their iPhone 16s, that's going to change the mainstream conversation a lot because we always assumed that these queries would need to go to a large cloud server somewhere and that a large model had to answer the queries. But as people are realizing that an array of smaller language models or SLMs can operate on device and do a serviceable job at answering these questions, that will change how we think about Gen AI as a whole, right? It's no longer about 405 billion parameter models, the most powerful models operating on a cloud, but being able to bring this on device to our pockets. And so I'm excited for the new use cases that it's going to unlock. There's a lot of industries where they weren't allowed to send their data to a company like OpenAI or Anthropic previously. Things like healthcare, where there's a lot of private patient information. But if you can self-host on an air-gapped computer, that's going to change the equation entirely.
Do you think the costs will go down, and will they go down substantially enough to open up use cases for smaller companies?
I think that there's an incredible amount of research and development and innovation coming in from researchers and academics through to hardware companies and the NVIDIAs of the world, through to startups building high performance inferencing capabilities. So I think all of this will actually decrease by an order of magnitude or larger. And that's really going to supercharge adoption in this space.
So, when you're talking to enterprise executives who are in the early stages of designing their production AI use case infrastructure, What do you advise them to do? Do you advise them to start by looking at small language models behind the firewall, or start by using a public model and then migrating, assuming that it is not specifically driven by compliance and regulatory requirements?
So this is something that I have seen this journey many times at a lot of different organizations. And the best performing ones are ones that the traditional advice of crawl, walk, run. And so for a lot of organizations, they start with a pilot, a POC, just to demonstrate that the technology does work and it can solve their solution. There's a lot of concerns out there about things like hallucination and cost and runtime, right? So being able to take a promising workflow and demonstrate to a business committee, a board of directors, and say, look, the technology, Gen AI, absolutely does work for this workflow. Here are the first 3 use cases we would recommend. Once you have demonstrated the potential in a handful of use cases, then it's about being able to build responsibly. Again, with reasonable timelines, being upfront about the costs of what it's going to take. For example, it is not easy to hire data scientists and engineers with expertise in this space just because it's so new. So being able to provide, again, reasonable timelines for when this can be delivered and demonstrating very clear success criteria, agreeing ahead of time to say, if we're able to develop a solution that is able to provide an answer with these SLAs and under these costs, then can we consider this to be a success? This is something I have worked for over a decade in the AI world. And time and again, we will get to 96% accuracy with very good recall and precision metrics. And inevitably, an executive will come in and be like, I tried this query and it doesn't work. So the whole thing, we need to redo it, right? But being able to have those conversations up front and understand that, like any software, there will be some failure component. But if we can achieve these metrics, is that good enough on the broader spectrum, right? Having those conversations upfront goes a long way.
So, we've covered a lot today in this episode. As we wrap up, what would you like our listeners to take away from our conversation today?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that I'm really trying to drive home here. First is there's a lot of chatter out there about what is the best model. I want to really ingrain with the audience that there is no single best model. What we will see in the coming years is that, let's just take an organization, let's just use Starbucks for today, right? An organization like Starbucks, each of their departments will actually have different Gen AI solutions. For example, their marketing and their HR departments might evaluate all the options and decide that certain solutions from well-known providers off the shelf will work just fine for them. But on the other hand, their business analyst division and maybe their recipe generation division, more of the secret sauce to Starbucks, they realize, hey, off the shelf isn't going to work for us. Maybe for strategic reasons, maybe for proprietary reasons, we need to develop our own in-house solution here. So a large organization like this, they won't be, it's not like today where we say a company is an AWS house or a GCP house. We will see an organization have some of their solutions utilizing Google Gemini, others utilizing OpenAI, others still using Llama 3.1 on Bedrock. So I think we're going to move to a multi-model landscape where we can be much more agnostic as to the proper solution.
Ivan Lee, thank you so much for talking with me today on AI Realized.
One
Thank you.
future is right.